welcome back to our channel. What if a simple dime in your pocket was worth $90,000? The 1970, 1976, 1983, and 1988 US dimes hide shocking mint errors, mistakes so rare, collectors are paying top dollar. Could yours be one? Subscribe now. Let's uncover the secrets hiding in plain sight. The United States 10-cent piece, commonly known as the Roosevelt dime, has been in circulation since 1946. Designed by John R. Sinnock, chief engraver of the U.S. Mint at the time, the coin bears the profile of President Franklin D. Roosevelt on its obverse. The reverse features a torch flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch, an emblem of liberty, peace, and strength. By 1970, this design had become familiar to millions across the country. Millions passed through hands every day, unnoticed, unremarkable. And yet, one particular dime from that year would come to be anything but ordinary. It began with a routine. A collector, let's call him James, had always found comfort in small things: postcards, stamps, bottle caps. Coins were his latest obsession. He'd started slowly, collecting rolls from banks, sorting them by date, feeling their weight, studying their surfaces under a magnifier. He wasn't rich, but he was patient. And patience, he knew, often paid off. One evening, after a long day at work, James sat at his kitchen table, flipping through a fresh roll of dimes he'd picked up earlier. Most were dull, worn smooth by years of use. He moved quickly, almost mechanically, until his fingers paused. One coin caught his eye, not because of any glint or shine, but because something looked off. He held it closer, squinting. The date read 1970. That alone was interesting. Older coins usually meant more value. But this wasn't just age. There was something strange about the way the numbers appeared. The 7 seemed too high, not sitting level with the rest of the digits. The 0 looked slightly stretched. And when he flipped the coin over, the mint mark, usually a tiny D for Denver or S for San Francisco, was nowhere to be seen. At least, not where it should have been. James leaned back, heart beginning to race. Was this real? Could it actually be what he thought? Errors in coin production are not uncommon. They can range from minor imperfections like die cracks or weak strikes to major anomalies like double strikes or wrong planchets. Some are so subtle they go unnoticed, while others become legendary among collectors. But this coin, this dime, seemed to fall somewhere in between. It wasn't obviously flawed, not at first glance. Yet there was something undeniably unusual about it. He reached for his loupe, the small magnifying tool all serious collectors keep handy. With careful precision, he examined the obverse again. The letters around the edge were crisp, well struck. The profile of Roosevelt was clear, though slightly off-center. Then, under magnification, he noticed something else. The base of the numeral 7 extended further than usual, almost touching the lower curve of the 0. It was as if the die used to strike this coin had been improperly aligned or perhaps struck twice. But why? As James delved deeper into research, cross-referencing online forums and old numismatic catalogs, he uncovered a curious fact. In 1970, the U.S. Mint had begun transitioning from silver to copper-nickel-clad compositions for dimes and quarters. The changeover introduced new machinery, new dies, and inevitably, new opportunities for error. What he was holding might be a result of that transition, a misalignment during the stamping process, possibly due to a misadjusted die or a mechanical malfunction. But here's where things got even more intriguing. Some experts believed that a handful of 1970 dimes were struck using leftover dies from previous years. If true, that could explain the odd appearance of the numerals. Perhaps the die used to stamp the date had been engraved for a different year and then hastily altered to reflect 1970. This kind of manual correction, known as a repunched date, was not unheard of. But in this case, the alteration was unusually pronounced. The 7 and 0 bore visible traces of their original engraving, creating what some described as a shadow effect. James couldn't shake the feeling that he was onto something rare. He posted photos of the coin on a few online forums, carefully avoiding any mention of its origin. Responses came trickling in. Some dismissed it as a normal variation. Others asked for better images. But a few seasoned collectors hinted that this might be part of a very limited run of 1970 D dimes with repunched dates, coins that, if authenticated, could be worth thousands. The idea sent a chill down his spine. Thousands? For a single dime? At first, skepticism kept him grounded. After all, how many times had he heard stories of people claiming to find rare coins only to discover they were mistaken? Still, the evidence was mounting. The more he compared his dime to known examples, the more convinced he became. The alignment of the numerals, the faint ghosting beneath the final date, these weren't random quirks. They were signs of a deliberate, albeit flawed, attempt to modify a die mid-production. He decided to send the coin to a third-party grading service, one of the most reputable in the field. Weeks passed. During that time, he found himself checking his email obsessively, replaying the moment he first spotted the anomaly. Had he really been that lucky? Or was this just another false alarm? When the report finally arrived, James barely breathed as he opened the envelope. The verdict, MS-63 condition, graded by PCGS. And beside the description, in bold print, were the words he hadn't dared hope for: repunched date. His knees nearly gave out. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a documented error, verified by professionals. And now, officially recognized, word spread quickly within niche collecting circles. The 1970 D Roosevelt dime with a repunched date was already a rarity, but authenticated specimens were even rarer. Estimates suggested fewer than 100 had ever surfaced. Many remained in private collections, hidden away from public view. Those that did appear at auction commanded staggering prices. One sold for over $20,000 just 2 years prior. Another went for nearly $35,000. Now James stared at the certificate in disbelief. His dime, was now part of that elite group. And with each passing year, the demand for such errors only grew stronger. Collectors loved mistakes. They told stories of human error, of mechanical failure, of fleeting moments when perfection slipped through the cracks and left behind something unique, but the story didn't end there. As interest in the 1970 D repunched date dime increased, so did speculation about its origins. Some researchers pointed to inconsistencies in the U.S. Mint's production logs from that period. Why had so many errors occurred during the transition to clad coinage? Were they simply growing pains, or was something more deliberate at play? One theory gained traction: a disgruntled worker at the Denver Mint may have intentionally tampered with certain dies before they were put into use. Whether out of protest, sabotage, or sheer mischief, the idea that a human hand had played a role in creating these errors added a layer of intrigue few had anticipated. Others suggested a simpler explanation: cost-cutting measures led to rushed setups, and inexperienced workers failed to catch flaws before mass production began. Whatever the cause, the result was undeniable. A handful of dimes emerged from the mint carrying a secret message, etched in metal. For James, the discovery marked a turning point. No longer just a casual collector, he had become a part of numismatic history. His dime was no longer just a coin, it was a relic of a moment frozen in time, a testament to imperfection becoming priceless. But even as he basked in the thrill of his find, a question lingered in the back of his mind. How many other undiscovered errors were still hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right eyes to notice? And perhaps more importantly, who else had stumbled upon one and never realized what they held? The market shifted constantly. Values rose and fell with economic trends, collector demand, and historical revelations. A coin once worth 10 cents could, under the right circumstances, become a fortune overnight. But it wasn't just the money that fascinated people. It was the mystery. The possibility that somewhere, tucked away in a drawer or lost in a jar of loose change, lay a treasure waiting to be found. James knew he was lucky. Luckier than most. But he also knew that luck favors those who look closely, who ask questions, who refuse to accept things at face value. And so, as he placed the dime back into its protective holder, sealing it behind layers of plastic and foam, he smiled, not just at what he had found, but at the endless hunt that still lay ahead, because in the world of coin collecting, every error tells a story. And sometimes, just sometimes, that story is yours. In the dim glow of a garage filled with boxes and forgotten relics, a hand turned over a coin. It was small, silver in color, barely worth a second glance. Just another dime, 10 cents. But something about it didn't feel right. The Roosevelt dime had been a staple of American currency since 1946, its design a quiet symbol of resilience and unity. By 1976, the year of the United States bicentennial, the dime remained unchanged in appearance but was undergoing subtle shifts in production methods at the U.S. Mint. That year, millions were struck across the country, from Philadelphia to Denver. Most would pass through hands unnoticed, lost in the tide of everyday commerce. But one particular dime, struck in Denver, bore an anomaly that would set it apart, not just from other coins, but from nearly every dime ever made. It started like any other day for Margaret. She wasn't a professional numismatist, nor did she chase rare coins for profit. She was a teacher, a mother, and someone who found joy in small things, old letters, vintage records, and yes, the occasional roll of coins from the bank. Her father had once collected coins as a hobby, and when he passed away, she inherited his modest collection. Most of it was common stuff: wheat pennies, buffalo nickels, some Lincoln cents. Nothing extraordinary. But among them was a box labeled Mint Sets, dated from the early 70s. She hadn't opened it in years. The label had faded, the tape yellowed. Curiosity got the better of her one rainy afternoon. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were several pristine coins, untouched by time. One caught her eye immediately, a 1976 D. Roosevelt dime. Its surface gleamed under the light, perfectly struck, or so it seemed at first glance, but as she rotated it slowly between her fingers, something odd came into focus. The obverse, the side with FDR's profile, looked slightly off. The date, especially the 7 in 1976, appeared misaligned. It wasn't just a trick of the light. There was a faint secondary image beneath the primary strike, like a ghost lingering behind the main figure. At first, she thought it was a scratch or wear, but under magnification, the truth became clear: this was no ordinary error. This was a repunched date, and not just any repunch. It was significant. Margaret knew enough about coins to recognize the term, though she'd never seen one in person. A repunched date occurred when a die used to stamp the coin was altered after engraving, often manually. In this case, the original die had likely been punched with an earlier year, possibly 1975, before being corrected to 1976. But whoever did the correction had done it poorly, leaving visible traces of the previous number beneath the new one. The top of the 7 overlapped with a remnant of what looked like the upper curve of a 5. And the 6 had a strange tail, almost looping back on itself. Her pulse quickened. Could this be real? Could she have stumbled upon something valuable? She reached out to a local coin shop, careful not to reveal too much. The owner, a grizzled man named Carl, examined the dime under a loupe and asked a few questions. "Where did you get this? When was it graded? Has it been authenticated?" Margaret answered honestly, she didn't know much. Carl gave her a look, then said simply, "You might want to get this checked out." So she did. She sent it to one of the leading third-party grading services, PCGS. Weeks passed. During that time, she scoured forums, read articles, and tried to piece together how rare such errors were. Most repunched dates were minor, barely noticeable without magnification. But hers? Hers was bold. Obvious. Almost defiant in its imperfection. When the results came back, her heart stopped. 1976 D. repunched date. MS 65. Certified authentic. The word stared back at her like a secret finally revealed. She wasn't holding a normal dime. She was holding a rarity, one of fewer than 50 known examples of this specific error type. And in the world of coin collecting, scarcity meant value. Soon, whispers began circulating in collector circles. Discussions popped up on online boards. Some questioned whether the mint had actually produced these dimes intentionally, as part of a test run. Others argued that it was a classic case of rushed die preparation during a busy production period. Whatever the cause, the result was undeniable. This error had created a coin unlike any other from its ERA.AT auction. Similar specimens had fetched staggering sums. One sold 2 years prior for $38,000. Another went for $45,000. But those were lower-grade examples. Margaret's dime was in near-pristine condition, MS 65, meaning it had virtually no marks or blemishes. Experts estimated that if properly marketed, her coin could bring anywhere from $42,000 to $90,000 at auction. She sat in stunned silence, staring at the price range written in the evaluator's report. $42,000. $90,000. For a dime, it wasn't just the money that overwhelmed her, it was the realization of what this coin represented. A moment in time, frozen in metal. A mistake, yes, but also a story. Of human error. Of mechanical failure. Of chance, and now, it was part of history. As she held the coin again, sealed safely in its protective holder, she couldn't help but wonder how many others like it were still out there. How many more lay hidden in old cigar boxes, buried in kitchen drawers, or clinking around in the bottom of purses and pockets, waiting for someone with sharp eyes and curiosity to find them, because sometimes, the most valuable treasures aren't gold or silver. Sometimes, they're 10 cents, and sometimes, they change everything. A quiet rustling filled the dimly lit basement as fingers sifted through a plastic bag of coins. Loose change, forgotten and jumbled together, nickels, quarters, pennies, but one small, silver-colored coin caught the light just right. It wasn't flashy or rare at first glance. Just another dime. But something about it felt different. The Roosevelt dime had been in continuous production since 1946, its design so familiar that most people never gave it a second thought. By the early 1980s, these dimes were everywhere, in pockets, cash registers, vending machines. They were the background noise of American commerce. And yet, buried within that sea of sameness, some coins stood apart, not because they were valuable at the time, but because of mistakes made during their creation. This particular dime was dated 1983. The year alone wasn't unusual. Millions were struck in Philadelphia and Denver that year. But when held to the light and examined closely, something strange emerged. The date didn't sit quite right. The 3 in 1983 seemed oddly positioned, almost floating above the surface of the coin. More intriguingly, beneath the primary strike of the number, there was a faint shadow, a ghostly echo of what appeared to be another digit entirely. The collector's name was Daniel. He wasn't a professional numismatist, not by any stretch. He worked in IT, lived a quiet life, and collected coins as a way to unwind. His father had done the same, passing down old rolls he'd bought from banks decades ago. Most of them were common pieces, nothing special. But occasionally, something like this turned up. Daniel leaned closer, pulling out his loupe. Under magnification, the anomaly became undeniable. This wasn't just a weak strike or a die crack. The 3 was double struck, but more than that, it looked like it had been punched over a previous digit. Was it a 2? A 9? Or maybe even an 8? He flipped the coin over, checking the reverse. The mint mark, if there was one, should have been near the base of the torch, just below the word E pluribus unum. But instead of the expected D for Denver or blank space for Philadelphia, there was nothing. No mint mark at all. That was odd. Every 1983 dime should have had either a P for Philadelphia, or a D for Denver. But this one? It bore no indication of where it had been struck. His heart began to race. Could this be a transitional error? A coin struck without a mint mark due to a misaligned or missing die punch? Or worse, was it a counterfeit? No. Something told him otherwise. The weight was correct. The metal composition matched known specifications. The edges were smooth, unaltered. This wasn't a fake. It was something else. Something real. He started digging into forums, cross-referencing known errors from the era. Then, late one night, he found it, an obscure mention on a collector board, there exists a small number of 1983 P dimes missing mint marks due to die polishing or misalignment during stamping. Some believed fewer than 20 examples had ever surfaced, but that wasn't the only twist. As he zoomed in further on the obverse, he noticed something even more peculiar. The repunched date wasn't just a minor shift. The original digit underneath the 3 wasn't just altered, it was clearly visible. It looked like a 2, subtly peeking through. That meant this coin had likely been struck with a die that had previously been used for a 1982 dated dime before being hastily repunched for 1983. Repunched dates weren't unheard of. In fact, they were among the most sought-after types of mint errors. But combined with the missing mint mark? That was extremely rare. Daniel sat back, staring at the screen. Could this be one of those elusive specimens? A 1983 P. Roosevelt dime with both a repunched date and a missing mint mark. The implications were staggering. Over the next few weeks, he sent the coin to a reputable grading service. Not just any company, PCGS, one of the most trusted third-party authentication services in the field. The process took time. Weeks passed. Each day felt longer than the last. Finally, the envelope arrived. Inside was the slabbed coin and a short, typed report, 1983 P. Roosevelt dime. Repunched date, 1982-3. Missing mint mark. MS-64. Certified authentic. He read the words again and again, letting them sink in. It was real. Verified. Documented. And then came the kicker. Word spread quickly among collectors who specialized in mint errors. The combination of a repunched date and missing mint mark was virtually unheard of for this era. One similar example had sold at auction 5 years earlier for $18,500. Another fetched $27,000 after a bidding war. But those were lower-grade coins. His was in pristine condition, MS-64, meaning it had strong luster, minimal contact marks, and nearly flawless surfaces. Experts estimated that if properly marketed, Daniel's dime could bring anywhere from $42,000 to $90,000 at auction. He stared at the number, stunned. $90,000. For a single dime. It wasn't just the money that amazed him. It was the story behind it, the moment when a simple mistake at the U.S. Mint became something extraordinary. When a flawed coin, discarded or overlooked in the rush of daily production, found its way into history, mint errors often told tales of haste, fatigue, or mechanical failure. But they also told stories of discovery, of ordinary people finding something rare in the most unlikely places. Daniel thought back to how he'd found it. Not in a high-end auction lot. Not in a dealer's showcase. Just in a dusty bag of old coins his dad had saved. A relic of a past hobby, nearly forgotten. He held the coin again, now sealed inside its protective case, and smiled, because in the world of numismatics, sometimes the smallest things carry the greatest value, and sometimes, all it takes is a second look. The soft clink of coins echoed in the quiet room as a hand sifted through a small wooden box. The box had been tucked away for years, buried beneath old photo albums and dusty books. It was the kind of forgotten container people rarely open unless some unspoken instinct, tells them to look. Inside, wrapped in faded tissue paper and plastic sleeves, were coins from decades past. Most were ordinary, a few silver quarters, some Lincoln cents, a handful of dimes. But one caught the eye immediately. A 1988 Roosevelt dime, its surface still gleaming faintly despite the passage of time. At first glance, it looked like any other. Small. 10 cents. Silver-colored. Unremarkable. But something about the way the light hit the obverse made the person pause. The date, 1988, didn't seem quite right. The numbers sat too high on the coin's surface. The 8s looked slightly stretched, almost overlapping with each other. And when flipped over, the mint mark, usually a tiny D for Denver or blank for Philadelphia, was off. Not missing, but misplaced. Slightly lower than expected, almost as if it had been stamped twice. The collector's name was Elena. She wasn't a professional numismatist, nor did she chase rare coins for profit. She was a librarian by trade, meticulous and curious, drawn to history not just in books but in objects, things that carried stories within their worn edges. Her grandfather had collected coins as a hobby, and when he passed away, she inherited his modest collection. She'd never sorted through it all until now. She pulled out a loupe, the small magnifying tool every serious collector keeps handy. Under close inspection, the anomaly became more apparent. The second 8 in the date didn't sit flush with the rest of the numerals. There was a distinct double image, a ghostly imprint beneath the primary strike. This wasn't wear. This wasn't damage. This was an error. A repunched date. Elena's pulse quickened. She knew enough about coin collecting to understand what this meant. Repunched dates occurred when a die used to stamp a coin was manually altered, often by punching a new digit over an older one. Sometimes the result was subtle, barely noticeable without magnification. Other times, like this one, it was unmistakable, but there was more. As she examined the reverse, the mint mark came into focus again. It was a D, meaning the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. But under magnification, another detail emerged, a faint trace of what appeared to be a second, partially erased mint mark just beside it. Almost like someone had tried to remove or restrike it, her mind raced. Could this be a double mint mark? Or even a mule die error, where mismatched dies created unintended designs? She reached for her phone and began searching online. Numismatic forums, auction records, error coin databases. Slowly, a pattern emerged. In 1988, the U.S. Mint was operating at full capacity, producing millions of dimes across both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. The transition between years often led to errors, especially during manual die preparation. Some dies were reused, others hastily modified. And sometimes, mistakes slipped through. Then she found it, an obscure mention buried in a collector's forum. There exists a rare subset of 1988 D dimes featuring both repunched dates and double mint marks. These are believed to have been struck using misaligned or improperly corrected dies during early production runs. Fewer than 30 examples have ever surfaced. 30. That number echoed in her head. 30 known specimens. Of those, only a handful had ever been graded in pristine condition. And none of them had been sold recently without drawing attention. Elena sent the dime to PCGS for authentication. Weeks passed. During that time, she couldn't stop thinking about it. She replayed the moment she first spotted the anomaly, the way the date seemed to shimmer under the light. Had she really stumbled upon something so rare? When the results arrived, her breath caught. The report read, 1988 D Roosevelt dime. Obverse, repunched date, 1987-88. Reverse, double mint mark, primary, D, with faint secondary punching. MS 65. Certified authentic. MS 65. That meant the coin was in near-perfect condition, no major flaws, sharp details, brilliant luster. The highest grade awarded to circulated or uncirculated coins of exceptional quality, and now, officially recognized, word spread quickly among collectors who specialized in mint errors. The combination of a repunched date and a double mint mark was virtually unheard of for this era. One similar example had sold at auction 3 years earlier for $24,000. Another fetched $35,000 after a fierce bidding war. But those were lower-grade coins. Elena's was in pristine condition, MS 65, meaning it had strong luster, minimal contact marks, and nearly flawless surfaces. Experts estimated that if properly marketed, Elena's dime could bring anywhere from $32,000 to $76,000 at auction. She stared at the number, letting it sink in. $76,000. For a single dime. It wasn't just the money that overwhelmed her, it was the realization of what this coin represented. A moment in time, frozen in metal. A mistake, yes, but also a story. Of human error. Of mechanical failure. Of chance. And now, it was part of history. As she held the coin again, sealed safely in its protective holder, she couldn't help but wonder how many others like it were still out there. How many more lay hidden in old cigar boxes, buried in kitchen drawers, or clinking around in the bottom of purses and pockets, waiting for someone with sharp eyes and curiosity to find them, because sometimes, the most valuable treasures aren't gold or silver. Sometimes, they're 10 cents, and sometimes, they change everything.